Sarah Martinez walked into the bustling office of Henderson and Associates Marketing Agency on a rainy Tuesday morning, clutching her coffee cup and laptop bag. To everyone around her, she appeared to be just another new employee starting her first day at the mid-sized firm in downtown Seattle. Her colleagues saw a quiet, slightly nervous woman in her early 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses who spoke softly and seemed eager to please. The truth was far more complex. Sarah Martinez wasn't even her real name. She was Agent Alexandra Kane, known in classified government circles by her operational code name Viper 1. For the past 8 years, she had been one of the most elite undercover operatives in the National Security Agency's Special Operations Division. Her mission at Henderson and Associates wasn't about marketing campaigns or client presentations. She was there to investigate what intelligence sources suggested was a sophisticated, money laundering operation hidden within the company's seemingly legitimate business operations. The operation had taken months to set up. Alexandra had undergone extensive preparation to assume Sarah's identity. She studied marketing terminology, practiced the software the company used, and even took acting classes to perfect the persona of a mild-mannered marketing coordinator. Her background had been carefully constructed by the agency's best forgers and computer specialists. According to her fabricated resume, Sarah had worked at several small marketing firms across the country before relocating to Seattle for a fresh start. On her first morning, Sarah was greeted by Rebecca Chen, the office manager, who seemed genuinely excited to have a new team member. Rebecca was a cheerful woman in her 40s who had worked at the company for over a decade. She led Sarah through the open plan office, introducing her to various colleagues and explaining the company's culture and expectations. "We're like a big family here," Rebecca explained as they walked past rows of cubicles where employees worked on their computers, phones pressed to their ears as they spoke with clients. "Mr. Henderson really believes in creating a supportive work environment where everyone can thrive." Sarah nodded and smiled, playing her part perfectly while her trained eyes scanned the office layout. She mentally noted the locations of security cameras, emergency exits, and the executive offices on the upper floor. The building was a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and modern fixtures, giving it a trendy startup atmosphere that seemed designed to attract young professionals. Her workstation was positioned strategically near the accounting department, which hadn't been an accident. The agency's intelligence suggested that if money laundering was occurring, it would likely involve manipulation of financial records and client billing. Sarah's cover story included experience with financial reporting, making her placement in a role that required coordination between marketing and accounting seem natural. During her first week, Sarah threw herself into learning the company's operations with the enthusiasm expected of a new employee. She attended training sessions, participated in team meetings, and gradually began building relationships with her coworkers. She was particularly interested in getting to know David Park, the head of accounting, and his small team of financial specialists. David was a methodical man in his late 30s who had been with the company for 5 years. He seemed competent and professional, but Sarah noticed he was often stressed and worked late hours. During casual conversations in the break room, she learned that the accounting department had been under increased pressure lately, due to rapid company growth and new client acquisitions. "We've been bringing on some really big accounts," David mentioned one afternoon as they waited for their coffee to brew. "International clients with complex billing requirements. It's challenging but exciting." Sarah expressed interest in learning more about the international aspects of the business, positioning herself as someone eager to expand her skills and take on additional responsibilities. This curiosity seemed natural for an ambitious new employee, but it also gave her legitimate reasons to ask questions about the company's more sensitive operations. The marketing agency appeared successful and well-managed on the surface. They had impressive client portfolios displayed throughout the office, showcasing campaigns for restaurants, retail chains, technology startups, and even some government contracts. The employees seemed genuinely engaged in their work, and the office atmosphere was professional yet relaxed. However, Alexandra's trained instincts picked up on subtle inconsistencies that wouldn't be apparent to ordinary observers. Certain client meetings were held behind closed doors with unusual secrecy. Some of the international clients had vague business descriptions that didn't quite align with their supposed marketing needs. The company's rapid growth seemed somewhat disproportionate to the size and scope of the campaigns she observed being developed. After 2 weeks on the job, Sarah had established herself as a reliable and hard-working team member. She consistently stayed late to finish projects, volunteered for additional assignments, and made an effort to be helpful to colleagues who seemed overwhelmed. This dedication didn't go unnoticed by management, and she began receiving more responsibility and access to company information. Her supervisor, Jennifer Walsh, was particularly impressed with Sarah's attention to detail and analytical skills. Jennifer was a sharp woman in her early 40s who managed the client services team and reported directly to the company's senior executives. During their weekly one-on-one meetings, Jennifer began sharing more strategic information about the company's direction and major client relationships. "You have a good eye for patterns and data analysis," Jennifer told Sarah during one of these meetings. "I'm thinking about involving you in some of our higher-level client reporting. Would you be interested in taking on some additional responsibilities?" Sarah expressed enthusiasm for the opportunity, knowing that access to high-level client information could be crucial to her investigation. She was careful to maintain her eager-to-please persona, while internally preparing for the deeper access this promotion might provide. As her 3rd week at the company began, Sarah felt she was making significant progress in establishing her cover and gaining the trust of key personnel. The challenge now would be to gradually probe deeper into the company's operations without raising suspicion. She needed to identify the specific mechanisms being used for money laundering, document the evidence, and determine which employees were knowingly involved versus those who might be unwitting participants in the scheme. The mission was becoming more complex as she realized that many of her colleagues were genuinely good people who believed they were working for a legitimate business. If her suspicions proved correct, exposing the truth would not only bring down the criminal operation but would also devastate the lives of innocent employees who had unknowingly been part of the scheme. Alexandra knew that successful undercover work required patience, careful observation, and the ability to maintain her false identity under pressure. As Viper 1, she had built a reputation for completing complex long-term operations, but each mission presented unique challenges that tested her skills and resolve. The investigation at Henderson and Associates was just beginning, and she sensed that the truth would be more complicated than anyone had initially suspected. 3 weeks into her assignment, Sarah Martinez had become a fixture at Henderson and Associates. Her colleagues had grown comfortable around her, sharing office gossip during coffee breaks and including her in after-work social gatherings. This integration was exactly what Alexandra Kane had hoped to achieve, as it provided her with access to informal information that rarely appeared in official company documents. The breakthrough came during a casual Friday evening drinks session at a nearby restaurant. Several employees from different departments had gathered to celebrate landing a major new client. Sarah sat quietly at the end of the table, nursing her drink and listening to conversations that revealed far more than her colleagues realized. "I still can't believe how much they're paying us for such simple campaigns," laughed Marcus Thompson, a junior account executive who had clearly had too much to drink. "I mean, $3 million for a basic digital marketing package? My last agency would have charged maybe $200,000 for the same work." Jennifer Walsh quickly shot Marcus a warning look, but the damage was already done. Sarah filed this information away while maintaining her casual demeanor. A $3 million campaign was indeed unusually expensive for the scope of work she had observed, especially when she considered the client's relatively modest business profile. The client in question was Meridian International Trading, a company that imported specialty foods from Eastern Europe. Sarah had seen their file briefly when helping organize client documents, and nothing about their business seemed to justify such massive marketing expenditures. They operated only 3 small retail locations and had minimal online presence before hiring Henderson and Associates. Over the following week, Sarah made it her mission to learn more about Meridian International and other high-paying clients. She volunteered to help with filing and data entry tasks that gave her legitimate reasons to access client records. Her methodical approach and attention to detail made her valuable to the overworked administrative staff, who were grateful for her assistance. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Henderson and Associates had acquired several international clients over the past 2 years, all paying dramatically inflated fees for relatively simple marketing services. These clients shared certain characteristics. They were all recently established businesses with vague ownership structures. They dealt primarily in cash-intensive industries, and their payment patterns were irregular and often involved multiple wire transfers from various international banks. Sarah's investigation took a significant step forward when she was asked to attend a client meeting that David Park couldn't make due to a family emergency. The meeting was with representatives from Baltic Ventures, another international client that had been paying unusually high fees for basic marketing services. The Baltic Ventures representatives were two men in expensive suits who spoke with slight Eastern European accents. They met with Jennifer Walsh and Michael Henderson, the company's founder and CEO, in the main conference room. Sarah was there ostensibly to take notes and handle any technical presentation requirements. What she observed during that 90-minute meeting confirmed her worst suspicions. The discussion had very little to do with actual marketing strategies, and instead focused heavily on payment schedules, invoice structures, and complex financial arrangements that seemed designed to obscure the flow of money, rather than promote any legitimate business objectives. Michael Henderson was clearly the central figure in whatever operation was taking place. He was a distinguished man in his late 50s who had built Henderson & Associates from a small startup into its current size over the past 15 years. During the meeting, he demonstrated intimate knowledge of international banking regulations and money transfer procedures that seemed far beyond what a marketing executive would typically need to know. We need to ensure the payment structure maintains the appropriate documentation trail, Henderson explained to the Baltic Ventures representatives. Our accounting team has developed protocols that satisfy all regulatory requirements while maintaining the flexibility you require for your international operations. The Baltic Ventures representatives nodded approvingly and discussed transferring additional funds through a network of subsidiary companies. They mentioned amounts that totaled nearly $10 million over the next 6 months, supposedly for an expanded marketing campaign that Sarah knew couldn't possibly require such massive funding. After the meeting, Sarah excused herself to the restroom and used the secure communication device hidden in her purse to send a coded message to her handler at the NSA. The message was brief, but urgent. Pattern confirmed. Primary target identified. Request enhanced surveillance authorization. The response came back within hours. Alexandra was instructed to maintain her cover while gathering specific evidence about the money laundering mechanism. The agency needed detailed financial records, communication logs, and proof of Michael Henderson's direct involvement in the illegal operations. Obtaining this evidence would require Sarah to gain access to Henderson's private office and the company's secure financial systems. This meant she needed to either earn significantly more trust from senior management or find alternative ways to access restricted areas of the building. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Jennifer Walsh announced that she would be taking a 2-week vacation to visit family in Europe, and she needed someone reliable to handle her responsibilities while she was away. Sarah had positioned herself perfectly for this opportunity through her consistent performance and willingness to take on additional tasks. I know it's a lot to ask, Jennifer said during their private meeting. You'd essentially be acting as interim client services manager. It means access to all client files, attendance at executive meetings, and responsibility for some of our most sensitive accounts. Sarah accepted the temporary promotion with appropriate enthusiasm, while internally celebrating this major breakthrough. Acting as interim client services manager would give her legitimate access to exactly the information she needed to complete her investigation. During Jennifer's first week away, Sarah worked diligently to maintain normal operations while carefully documenting evidence of the money laundering scheme. She discovered that Henderson & Associates was essentially operating 2 parallel businesses. The legitimate marketing agency served real clients and generated modest but steady profits. The illegal operation used fabricated, international clients to process massive amounts of money through complex billing and payment schemes. The system was sophisticated and had clearly been developed over several years. Money would enter the United States through legitimate business channels, get processed through Henderson & Associates accounts as payment for marketing services, and then be distributed to various domestic accounts controlled by the ultimate beneficiaries of the laundering operation. David Park, the head of accounting, appeared to be a knowing participant in the scheme. His stress and long hours made sense when viewed through this lens. He was managing two completely different sets of financial records while ensuring that the illegal operations remained hidden from employees who weren't part of the conspiracy. Sarah also discovered that several other employees were likely involved, including Marcus Thompson, whose loose lips had first alerted her to the inflated client payments. The operation required multiple people to maintain the elaborate facade, but the majority of Henderson and Associates employees appeared to be genuinely unaware of the illegal activities taking place around them. As Jennifer's vacation week continued, Sarah gathered detailed evidence while maintaining her cover. She photographed financial documents, recorded conversations when possible, and built a comprehensive picture of how the money laundering operation functioned. The evidence was damning, but she still needed to identify the ultimate source of the money being laundered and the final destinations, where the cleaned funds were being sent. The investigation was approaching a critical phase where maintaining her cover would become increasingly difficult. Soon she would need to make decisions about how to proceed without alerting the conspirators to her true identity and mission. The moment Sarah had been dreading finally arrived during her second week as interim client services manager. She was working late in Jennifer's office, carefully photographing client files, when she heard footsteps in the hallway. The building should have been empty except for the security guard who made rounds every few hours. Sarah quickly closed the file cabinet and pretended to be working on her laptop when Michael Henderson appeared in the doorway. "Sarah, I didn't expect anyone to still be here," Henderson said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp as they scanned the office. "Is everything going smoothly with Jennifer away?" "Oh yes, Mr. Henderson," Sarah replied, maintaining her nervous employee persona. "I'm just catching up on some client reports. I want to make sure everything is perfect when Jennifer returns." Henderson stepped into the office, and Sarah noticed he was carrying a briefcase and seemed more formally dressed than usual for the late evening hour. "You're very dedicated. I appreciate employees who go above and beyond." He paused, studying her carefully. "You know, I've been meaning to talk with you about your future here. You've shown remarkable aptitude for understanding our more complex client relationships." The conversation felt like a test, and Sarah sensed that Henderson was evaluating whether to bring her deeper into the operation or whether he had begun to suspect something about her true identity. She needed to respond in a way that demonstrated loyalty and ambition, without seeming too eager or knowledgeable about aspects of the business she shouldn't understand yet. "I really love working here," she said, adding a touch of genuine enthusiasm to her voice. "The international clients are fascinating. I've always been interested in global business operations." Henderson's expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught a subtle shift in his posture that suggested her response had been acceptable. "Well, keep up the excellent work, but don't stay too late. We need our best employees well rested." After Henderson left, Sarah waited 30 minutes before resuming her document photography. The encounter had rattled her more than she cared to admit. Maintaining deep cover for extended periods required constant vigilance, and even the smallest mistake could expose her true identity and jeopardize the entire operation. The next morning brought an unexpected development that would test her abilities in ways she hadn't anticipated. Rebecca Chen approached her desk with an unusual request from Henderson's assistant. "Mr. Henderson needs someone to accompany him to a client meeting today," Rebecca explained. "It's with one of our biggest international accounts, and he specifically requested that you attend. Apparently he was impressed with your work during Jennifer's absence." Sarah felt a surge of both excitement and anxiety. Direct involvement in high-level client meetings could provide crucial intelligence, but it also meant increased scrutiny from Henderson and potential exposure to other participants in the money laundering operation, who might be more suspicious of new faces. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon at an upscale restaurant downtown. Sarah spent her lunch break researching the client, Draken Enterprises, using the company's internal files and what limited public information she could find online. Draken claimed to be an import-export business specializing in luxury goods from Europe and Asia, but their business model seemed deliberately vague. Henderson picked her up from the office in his BMW, and during the drive, He briefed her on what to expect. "Our clients value discretion above all else," he explained. "They're very successful, but they prefer to keep their business operations private. I need you to be professional, but not overly curious about details that don't directly concern our marketing services." The warning was clear, and Sarah understood that she was being brought into a situation where asking too many questions could raise suspicions. She would need to observe carefully while maintaining the appearance of someone who was focused solely on marketing-related matters. The restaurant was an expensive establishment with private dining rooms that provided the kind of discretion that apparently appealed to Henderson's special clients. They were seated in a secluded area where their conversation couldn't be overheard by other diners. The Dracon Enterprises representatives were three individuals who immediately struck Sarah as far more sophisticated and dangerous than the previous clients she had encountered. The primary contact was a woman named Elena Volkov, who appeared to be in her 40s and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to wielding significant power. She was accompanied by two men who said little, but whose alert postures and careful observation of their surroundings suggested they might be providing security. During the meal, the conversation followed a pattern similar to the Baltic Ventures meeting, with extensive discussion of financial arrangements disguised as marketing strategy. However, Elena Volkov asked more pointed questions about Henderson and Associates' operational security and the reliability of their financial processing systems. "We're expanding our operations significantly over the next year," Volkov explained, in accented English that suggested Eastern European origins. "This will require processing much larger amounts through your systems. We need absolute assurance that your protocols can handle increased volume without attracting unwanted attention." Henderson assured her that his systems were robust and had successfully handled similar expansions for other international clients. He mentioned specific amounts that made Sarah's pulse quicken. They were discussing the potential laundering of over $50 million through Henderson and Associates over the next 12 months. The most disturbing moment came when Volkov's attention turned to Sarah herself. "Michael, you mentioned that you have new personnel involved in client services. How do you ensure the loyalty and discretion of your staff?" Sarah felt the weight of Volkov's gaze as Henderson explained her background and capabilities. Sarah has been exceptional. She understands the importance of confidentiality and has shown real aptitude for the complexities of international business operations. Volkov nodded slowly, but continued studying Sarah with an intensity that suggested she was evaluating her as both an asset and a potential security risk. "In my experience, new employees can sometimes be unpredictable. How long has she been with your organization?" "About 2 months now," Henderson replied. "She came highly recommended, and her performance has exceeded expectations." The conversation moved on to other topics, but Sarah remained acutely aware that Volkov had identified her as a potential weak link in Henderson's operation. This scrutiny was dangerous, but it also confirmed that she was getting close to the heart of a much larger criminal enterprise than initially suspected. After the meeting, Henderson seemed pleased with how things had progressed. During the drive back to the office, he spoke more openly about the company's growth plans and the importance of maintaining excellent relationships with their most valuable clients. "Elena represents some very powerful interests," he explained. "These are people who could make Henderson and Associates incredibly successful, but they require absolute professionalism and discretion. I hope I can count on you to understand the sensitivity of these relationships." Sarah assured him of her complete loyalty and discretion, while mentally preparing for the increased danger that would come with deeper involvement in the operation. Elena Volkov's questions had revealed that the money laundering scheme was connected to much larger criminal enterprises, possibly involving organized crime groups with international reach. That evening, Sarah sent another coded message to her NSA handler, reporting the new developments and requesting background information on Elena Volkov and Dracon Enterprises. The response indicated that Volkov was already known to international law enforcement as a suspected money laundering coordinator for Eastern European criminal organizations, but concrete evidence against her had been difficult to obtain. The investigation was entering a new phase where the stakes were significantly higher, and the potential for violence was becoming a real consideration. Sarah realized that maintaining her cover while gathering the evidence needed to bring down the entire operation would require all of her skills as Viper 1 and potentially put her in grave personal danger. Jennifer Walsh returned from her European vacation with a noticeably different demeanor. Where she had previously been open and collaborative with Sarah, she now seemed guarded and occasionally suspicious. Sarah suspected that Henderson had briefed Jennifer about the Dracon Enterprises meeting and Sarah's increased involvement with sensitive clients. The change in Jennifer's behavior created new challenges for maintaining her cover while continuing the investigation. Sarah needed to appear completely normal and dedicated to her marketing coordinator role while secretly gathering the final pieces of evidence required to expose the money laundering operation. The opportunity came when David Park approached her with an unusual request. The accounting department was implementing a new financial software system, and David needed someone with strong analytical skills to help verify that client billing records had been properly transferred to the new platform. "I know this isn't exactly marketing work," David explained, seeming genuinely apologetic, "but you've shown such attention to detail and frankly, I'm drowning in data verification tasks. It would probably take a few weeks of part-time work alongside your regular duties." Sarah enthusiastically accepted the assignment, recognizing it as an unprecedented opportunity to access the complete financial records of Henderson and Associates. Working directly with the accounting systems would allow her to trace money flows, identify patterns, and gather the detailed evidence needed to build an airtight legal case against the entire operation. Over the next week, Sarah spent several hours each day in the accounting department, working closely with David and his team to verify client records. The work gave her legitimate access to financial data going back 3 years, revealing the full scope and sophistication of the money laundering scheme. The evidence was overwhelming. Henderson and Associates had processed over $200 million through fraudulent client accounts during the past 3 years. The money originated from various international sources and was distributed to dozens of domestic accounts, controlled by individuals and shell companies throughout the United States. What made the scheme particularly clever was how it exploited legitimate business practices to hide illegal activities. Real marketing work was performed for many clients, creating genuine business documentation that could withstand casual scrutiny. The inflated billing and complex payment structures were hidden within contracts and invoices that appeared professionally prepared and business appropriate. Sarah also discovered that the operation had been growing rapidly over the past year, with new international clients bringing increasingly larger amounts of money to be laundered. Elena Volkov's Dracon Enterprises represented the largest single source of funds, but there were multiple other criminal organizations using Henderson and Associates services. The most disturbing revelation was the extent to which legitimate employees had unknowingly contributed to the illegal operation. Marketing materials were genuinely created for fake clients. Graphic designers developed logos and websites for shell companies, and account managers maintained professional relationships with people they believed were legitimate business contacts. David Park was clearly a central figure in managing the financial aspects of the scheme, but Sarah began to suspect that even he might not fully understand the criminal nature of what he was facilitating. During their work sessions, he occasionally made comments that suggested he believed the unusual payment arrangements were simply the result of complex international business requirements, rather than deliberate money laundering. Some of these overseas clients have such complicated banking requirements, David mentioned one afternoon as they reviewed particularly convoluted payment records. "I never realized how difficult international business could be until I started working with Michael's special accounts." Sarah began to realize that Henderson had been careful to compartmentalize information, ensuring that most participants in the scheme didn't understand the full picture of what they were facilitating. This approach protected the operation from exposure, while also providing Henderson with plausible deniability regarding the criminal intent of his employees. The situation became more dangerous when Sarah noticed that her computer access was being monitored more closely than before. Routine system administration emails began appearing in her inbox, ostensibly about software updates and security protocols, but with timing that coincided suspiciously with her access to sensitive financial records. Elena Volkov's influence on the operation became more apparent when she began making regular visits to Henderson and Associates. Unlike other clients who met with Henderson in restaurants or other external locations, Volkov often came directly to the office and spent hours in private meetings with Henderson and David Park. During one of these visits, Sarah encountered Volkov in the break room while getting coffee. The interaction was brief but unsettling. "You're Sarah, the new client services coordinator," Volkov said, her tone neutral but her eyes calculating. "Michael speaks very highly of your work. Tell me, what do you find most interesting about working with international clients?" Sarah maintained her cover personality, expressing enthusiasm about learning global business practices and appreciation for the opportunity to work with sophisticated clients. Volkov listened carefully to her responses, occasionally asking follow-up questions that seemed designed to test her knowledge and motivations. "International business requires great discretion," Volkov observed. "Sometimes people who ask too many questions or show excessive curiosity about matters outside their responsibilities can create complications." The warning was subtle, but unmistakable. Sarah assured Volkov that she understood the importance of focusing on her specific duties and maintaining confidentiality about client relationships. That evening, Sarah reviewed her progress and realized that she had gathered enough evidence to expose the money laundering operation and identify most of the key participants. However, she still needed to determine the ultimate sources of the money being laundered and the final destinations where the cleaned funds were being sent. The NSA wanted to roll up the entire network, not just the portion operating through Henderson and Associates. This meant that Sarah needed to maintain her cover long enough to identify the broader criminal enterprise that Volkov represented. The decision to continue the investigation despite increasing personal risk was complicated by her growing concern for the innocent employees who would be devastated when the truth was revealed. People like Rebecca Chen, Marcus Thompson, and possibly even David Park had built their careers around what they believed was a legitimate business. Sarah sent another coded message to her handler, outlining her findings and requesting guidance on how long to maintain her cover before moving to the takedown phase. The response was clear: continue gathering intelligence until the broader network could be identified and disrupted simultaneously. This meant that Sarah would need to navigate increasingly dangerous circumstances while maintaining her false identity under growing scrutiny from people who had killed to protect their interests in the past. The investigation was approaching its most critical and perilous phase. As she prepared for another day of playing Sarah Martinez, marketing coordinator Alexandra Kane reminded herself why this mission was important. The money being laundered through Henderson and Associates was funding serious criminal activities including drug trafficking, human trafficking, and international terrorism. Stopping this operation would save lives and disrupt criminal networks that pose genuine threats to national security. The next morning brought news that would test her resolve and skills in unexpected ways. Henderson announced that he was promoting her to a permanent senior position that would require even deeper involvement in client relationships and access to information that no legitimate employee should possess. The promotion to senior client relations manager came with a corner office, a significant salary increase, and access to information that confirmed Sarah's worst fears about the scope of the criminal enterprise she had infiltrated. Henderson presented the promotion as recognition of her exceptional performance and natural aptitude for managing complex international relationships. "You've proven yourself invaluable over these past months," Henderson explained during the private meeting where he offered her the new position. "Our most important client specifically requested that you be given greater responsibility for their accounts. That's unprecedented for someone who's been here such a short time." Sarah accepted the promotion with appropriate gratitude, while internally recognizing it as both an opportunity and a trap. The position would give her access to the highest levels of the money laundering operation, but it would also place her under constant scrutiny from criminals who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats to their enterprise. Her new office came with access to a secure computer system that contained detailed records of all international client relationships. What she discovered in those files exceeded even her intelligence agency's estimates of the operation's scope. Henderson and Associates was processing money for at least 12 different criminal organizations across Eastern Europe, Asia, and South America. The amounts were staggering. Over the past year alone, More than $400 million had been laundered through various fake marketing contracts and shell company arrangements. The money funded activities ranging from weapons trafficking to cybercrime operations that targeted American businesses and government agencies. Elena Volkov's organization was indeed the largest single client, but Sarah discovered that Volkov was actually coordinating money laundering for multiple criminal groups rather than representing just one. The woman Sarah had met was essentially running a criminal financial services operation that used Henderson and Associates as its primary American processing center. The secure computer system also revealed that Henderson's operation extended far beyond the marketing agency. He had established similar arrangements with at least 6 other businesses in different cities, creating a network of money laundering fronts that could process enormous amounts of criminal funds while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business operations. Most disturbing was the discovery that Henderson had detailed background files on every employee, including extensive personal information about their families, financial situations, and potential vulnerabilities. The file labeled Sarah Martinez contained fabricated information that matched her cover identity perfectly, but also included notes about her value to the operation and assessments of her loyalty and trustworthiness. Elena Volkov had clearly been investigating Sarah's background because the file contained additional information that hadn't been part of her original cover story. Someone had been asking questions about her supposed previous employers and educational background. Fortunately, the NSA's cover preparation had anticipated this level of scrutiny, and the fabricated trail would withstand detailed investigation. However, Sarah realized that her continued survival depended on maintaining perfect performance in her role, while avoiding any actions that might trigger deeper suspicion about her true identity. The criminals she was dealing with had resources and expertise that made them extremely dangerous adversaries. The pressure intensified when Henderson informed her that she would be attending a major meeting the following week with representatives from all of Volkov's partner organizations. The gathering was being held at a private estate outside the city and would include the highest-level decision-makers from the criminal network. "This is a significant honor," Henderson explained. "Elena specifically requested your presence because she wants the financial coordination team to understand how our American operations function. You'll essentially be presenting our capabilities to potential new clients." Sarah understood that this meeting represented both the culmination of her investigation and its most dangerous moment. She would be surrounded by international criminals who had spent decades evading law enforcement and who wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone they perceived as a threat. In preparation for the meeting, Sarah worked closely with David Park to develop detailed presentations about Henderson and Associates' money laundering capabilities. The work required her to demonstrate comprehensive understanding of the illegal operation while maintaining her cover as someone who believed she was simply facilitating complex international business transactions. David's behavior during this preparation period confirmed Sarah's suspicion that he was largely unaware of the criminal nature of their work. He approached the presentations with the same professional diligence he applied to legitimate business projects, focusing on efficiency and client satisfaction, without apparent concern about the illegal implications of their activities. "I want everything to be perfect," David told her as they worked late one evening to finalize the financial projections. "These clients generate most of our revenue, and if we lose their business, the company would probably have to lay off half the staff." Sarah realized that David, like many other employees, had been gradually drawn into the operation through incremental compromises that individually seemed reasonable, but collectively constituted serious criminal activity. Henderson had been skillful in recruiting and maintaining staff who were competent enough to perform their roles effectively, but naive enough to avoid asking uncomfortable questions about the true nature of their work. The week before the meeting, Sarah sent what she knew might be her final intelligence report to the NSA. The information she had gathered over months of undercover work provided a complete picture of one of the largest money laundering operations ever discovered operating within the United States. Her handler's response was both encouraging and sobering. The intelligence would be used to coordinate simultaneous raids on Henderson and Associates and related businesses in multiple cities. But the operation couldn't commence until Sarah safely extracted herself from the criminal meeting. This meant she would need to attend the gathering, gather final intelligence about the broader criminal network, and then escape before law enforcement moved against the organization. The extraction plan was complex and dangerous. Sarah would attend the meeting as scheduled, but NSA operatives would be positioned nearby to provide support if her cover was blown or if she encountered immediate danger. At a predetermined time, she would excuse herself from the meeting and rendezvous with the extraction team. The plan required precise timing and a considerable amount of luck. If the criminals became suspicious of her during the meeting, or if the extraction was delayed for any reason, Sarah could find herself surrounded by dangerous individuals who wouldn't hesitate to kill her to protect their operation. As the meeting date approached, Sarah noticed increased security around Henderson and Associates. New personnel appeared in the building, ostensibly as temporary consultants, but their behavior and positioning suggested they were actually security operatives tasked with monitoring employee activities and protecting the operation from potential threats. Elena Volkov's visits to the office became more frequent, and Sarah observed her conducting what appeared to be security briefings with Henderson and his inner circle. The atmosphere in the office grew more tense as employees sensed that something significant was happening without understanding what it might be. On the day before the scheduled meeting, Sarah received an unexpected visit from Jennifer Walsh, who seemed genuinely concerned about her well-being. "I know you're excited about tomorrow's meeting," Jennifer said during a private conversation in Sarah's office, "but I want you to understand that these are very serious people who don't tolerate mistakes or indiscretions. Once you're at that level of client interaction, there's no going back to simpler responsibilities." The warning seemed to come from genuine concern rather than suspicion, suggesting that Jennifer understood more about the dangerous nature of Henderson's operation than she had previously revealed. Sarah thanked Jennifer for her advice while carefully studying her expression for any signs that might indicate Jennifer suspected her true identity. That evening, Sarah made her final preparations for what would either be the successful conclusion of her mission or potentially her last night alive. She reviewed the extraction protocols one more time, checked her concealed communication devices, and mentally rehearsed the cover stories she would use to explain any suspicious behavior during the meeting. As she prepared for bed in her apartment, Sarah allowed herself a moment to consider the innocent employees who would soon discover that their workplace had been the center of a massive criminal operation. People like Rebecca Chen, who genuinely cared about creating a positive work environment, would be devastated to learn they had unknowingly facilitated money laundering for international criminal organizations, the weight of maintaining her false identity for months while watching colleagues build relationships and plan futures based on what they believed was legitimate work had taken an emotional toll that Sarah hadn't fully anticipated when the mission began. Being Viper 1 required compartmentalizing these feelings, but she couldn't entirely suppress her sympathy for the innocent people who would be hurt when the truth was revealed. Tomorrow's meeting would determine whether months of dangerous undercover work would successfully expose a criminal network that threatened national security, or whether Alexandra Kane would become another casualty in the ongoing war between law enforcement and organized crime. Either way, Sarah Martinez's career at Henderson and Associates was about to come to an end. The private estate where the meeting was held sat on 50 acres of wooded land an hour outside Seattle, accessible only through a single gated entrance monitored by armed security personnel. Sarah arrived with Henderson and David Park in Henderson's BMW, following a convoy of luxury vehicles carrying other participants in what was clearly a major gathering of criminal leadership. The estate's main house was an imposing structure that had obviously been chosen for its isolation and defensible position. Sarah counted at least a dozen security operatives positioned around the property as their car approached the main entrance. These weren't ordinary bodyguards, but professional security specialists who moved with the precision and alertness of military veterans. Elena Volkov greeted them at the entrance, dressed in an elegant business suit that somehow made her appear even more formidable than during their previous encounters. She was accompanied by a man she introduced as Viktor Kozlov, who appeared to be her primary lieutenant and security coordinator. "Sarah, I'm pleased you could join us," Volkov said, her tone cordial but her eyes constantly evaluating. "Today you'll meet some very important people who are interested in expanding their American operations. Your expertise will be valuable in helping them understand our capabilities." The interior of the house had been converted into a sophisticated conference facility with multiple meeting rooms, advanced communication equipment, and security systems that would prevent any unauthorized recording or transmission of information. Sarah noted the locations of exits and security cameras while maintaining her cover as an eager marketing professional honored to participate in such an important business gathering. The other attendees represented what Sarah recognized as a who's who of international organized crime. There were representatives from Russian syndicates, Eastern European trafficking organizations, Asian criminal enterprises, and South American cartels. The gathering represented billions of dollars in illegal activities and thousands of deaths caused by their various operations. Henderson delivered the opening presentation, outlining the growth and capabilities of his money laundering network. He spoke with obvious pride about the sophistication of his operations and their success in processing enormous amounts of money without attracting law enforcement attention. Over the past 3 years, we've perfected systems that can handle virtually unlimited volume while maintaining complete security, Henderson explained to the assembled criminals. Our American network now includes operations in 8 major cities, with processing capabilities that exceed $1 billion annually. Sarah felt sick as she listened to Henderson describe the expansion of criminal operations that she knew were funding terrorism, human trafficking, and drug distribution that destroyed communities across America. The scope of the network was even larger than her intelligence had suggested. When her turn came to present, Sarah delivered a detailed analysis of the financial processing systems that made the money laundering possible. She had to demonstrate comprehensive knowledge of the operation while avoiding any statements that might later be used as evidence of her willing participation in criminal activity. The presentation went smoothly until Viktor Kozlov began asking increasingly specific questions about security protocols and background verification procedures for employees. His questions seemed designed to test whether Sarah understood the criminal nature of the operation she was describing. In your experience, how do you identify employees who might pose security risks? Kozlov asked, his accent thick but his English precise. What measures do you take to ensure loyalty among staff who handle sensitive information? Sarah answered carefully, describing general business practices for maintaining confidentiality and employee screening without acknowledging the illegal context that made these measures necessary. However, she could see that Kozlov wasn't entirely satisfied with her responses. During a break in the presentations, Sarah excused herself to use the restroom, which provided an opportunity to check her concealed communication device. The signal from her NSA support team confirmed that they were in position and ready to execute the extraction plan when she gave the appropriate signal. However, as she returned to the meeting room, Sarah noticed that the security arrangements had changed. Additional guards had been positioned near the exits, and Viktor Kozlov was having quiet conversations with several security operatives while watching her carefully. The afternoon session focused on planning the expansion of money laundering operations to handle what Volkov described as a massive increase in funds that would need processing over the next year. The amounts being discussed exceeded Sarah's worst estimates of the criminal network's scope. We're projecting the need to process over $2 billion during the next 12 months, Volkov announced to the assembled group. This will require significant expansion of our American operations and careful coordination among all participants. The expansion plans included establishing new front businesses, recruiting additional personnel, and developing more sophisticated systems for disguising the flow of criminal funds. Sarah realized she was witnessing the planning stages of what would become one of the largest money laundering operations in history. As the meeting progressed into the evening, Sarah became increasingly aware that something was wrong. Viktor Kozlov's scrutiny had intensified, and she noticed that security personnel were now positioned to monitor the room's occupants, rather than just protecting against external threats. The situation became critical when Volkov called for a private conversation with Henderson, David Park, and Sarah. They were escorted to a smaller room where Volkov's demeanor became noticeably more serious and threatening. We've been discussing security protocols, Volkov began, her voice taking on a harder edge. Viktor has expressed some concerns about new personnel being given access to sensitive information without appropriate verification. Henderson immediately moved to defend Sarah, explaining her value to the operation and the thoroughness of her background check. However, Sarah could see that Volkov's suspicions hadn't been entirely allayed by his reassurances. "I'm sure Sarah understands the importance of absolute loyalty," Volkov continued, her gaze fixed on Sarah's face. "In our business, people who betray trust don't simply lose their jobs, they lose their lives." The threat was explicit and immediate. Sarah realized that her cover might be compromised and that she needed to execute her extraction plan immediately, or risk being killed by the assembled criminals. David Park, who had been listening to the conversation with growing alarm, suddenly spoke up with a question that revealed he was finally beginning to understand the true nature of their work. "Elena, when you talk about betrayal and trust, are you saying that our marketing business is, actually?" David's voice trailed off as the implications became clear to him. The moment of David's realization created a distraction that Sarah knew she had to exploit immediately. Her survival and the success of her mission depended on the next few minutes, and there would be no second chances if her extraction attempt failed. She activated her emergency signal while maintaining her composure, knowing that NSA operatives were moving into position around the estate. The final phase of her mission as Viper 1 was about to begin, and it would determine whether she lived to testify against the criminal network she had spent months infiltrating. The extraction began exactly as planned, but the reality of escaping from a compound filled with armed criminals proved far more chaotic than any training scenario Alexandra had experienced. The NSA assault team's breach of the estate's perimeter triggered immediate lockdown protocols, with security operatives moving to secure all exits and protect the high-value criminal targets inside. Sarah used David Park's moment of horrified realization as cover to excuse herself from the private meeting room. "I think I need some air," she said, feigning distress at the increasingly tense atmosphere. "This is all much more intense than I expected." Volkov's suspicious gaze followed her as she left the room, but the sudden commotion from security personnel responding to the perimeter breach diverted attention from her movements. Sarah moved quickly through the house, navigating toward the predetermined extraction point while avoiding the growing chaos as criminals and their security teams prepared for what they assumed was a law enforcement raid. The sounds of gunfire erupted from multiple directions as NSA operatives engaged the estate's security forces. Sarah knew she had minutes at most before the entire compound would be locked down completely, making extraction impossible and likely resulting in her death as a suspected law enforcement operative. Henderson's voice echoed through the house's intercom system, calling for all personnel to remain calm and follow security protocols. However, the panic among the assembled criminals was evident as they realized their supposedly secure meeting had been compromised. Sarah reached the kitchen area where a service entrance provided access to the grounds behind the main house. According to her extraction plan, the NSA team would approach from this direction to minimize crossfire with the estate's main security positions. As she opened the service door, Sarah came face to face with Viktor Kozlov, who had apparently anticipated her route and positioned himself to intercept her escape attempt. His expression showed no surprise at finding her there, confirming that her cover had indeed been compromised. "Sarah Martinez," Kozlov said, raising a pistol toward her. "Or should I call you by your real name, Agent Alexandra Kane?" The revelation that he knew her true identity meant that the criminal network had resources within law enforcement or intelligence agencies that had provided them with information about her mission. This breach represented a catastrophic failure of operational security that endangered not only her life, but potentially other ongoing operations. Alexandra abandoned her Sarah Martinez persona completely, reverting to her training as Viper 1. She moved with lethal precision, disarming Kozlov and neutralizing him before he could raise an alarm about her true identity. However, the confrontation had cost precious time, and she could hear security teams moving to lock down the entire compound. The sound of approaching helicopters indicated that the NSA assault was escalating beyond the surgical extraction that had been planned. What should have been a quiet extraction had become a full military-style raid that would undoubtedly result in casualties and potentially allow some of the criminal leadership to escape. Alexandra made her way through the estate's grounds toward the extraction point, using cover and movement techniques that felt natural after years of covert operations. The irony wasn't lost on her that after months of pretending to be a mild-mannered marketing coordinator, she was finally able to operate as the elite agent she actually was. The extraction team found her at the predetermined rendezvous point, and within minutes she was aboard a helicopter lifting off from the estate as law enforcement vehicles surrounded the compound below. From the air, she could see the scale of the operation that had been triggered by her intelligence gathering. The aftermath of the raid revealed both the success and limitations of her months-long investigation. Henderson and Associates was shut down, and Michael Henderson was arrested along with David Park and several other employees who had been knowingly involved in the money laundering operation. Elena Volkov and most of the international criminal leadership managed to escape during the chaos, though several of their operations were disrupted by the intelligence Alexandra had gathered. The $2 billion expansion they had been planning was effectively derailed, but the broader criminal network remained largely intact. David Park's arrest was particularly difficult for Alexandra to accept. His genuine shock at discovering the true nature of his work suggested that he had been manipulated into criminal activity rather than choosing it willingly. However, his intimate knowledge of the financial systems made him legally culpable regardless of his intentions. The innocent employees of Henderson and Associates faced devastating consequences as their workplace was revealed to have been a criminal front. Rebecca Chen, Marcus Thompson, and dozens of others lost their jobs and found their professional reputations tainted by association with the money laundering operation, despite having no knowledge of the illegal activities. The investigation's success was measured in hundreds of millions of dollars in criminal assets seized, multiple arrests of money laundering facilitators, and the disruption of funding streams that supported terrorism and organized crime. However, Alexandra knew that other operations would quickly emerge to replace Henderson and Associates, and the criminals who had escaped would establish new systems for laundering their illegal profits. During her debriefing, Alexandra learned that Viktor Kozlov's knowledge of her true identity had come from a security breach within a federal database that contained information about undercover operatives. The breach represented a serious compromise that endangered other ongoing operations and required a complete review of operational security protocols. The revelation that criminal organizations had penetrated federal information systems highlighted the evolving sophistication of modern organized crime and the challenges faced by law enforcement agencies attempting to combat international criminal networks with resources that rivaled those of small nations. 3 months after the raid, Alexandra received a new assignment that would require her to assume another false identity and infiltrate a different criminal organization. The work of Viper 1 was never finished, as each successful operation revealed new threats that required investigation and disruption. As she prepared for her next mission, Alexandra reflected on the personal cost of maintaining false identities for extended periods, while working among people who believed she was someone completely different. The job required not only professional skills but emotional resilience to navigate the moral complexities of deception in service of a greater good. The Henderson and Associates investigation had exposed a massive criminal network and prevented billions of dollars from being laundered to fund illegal activities. However, it had also demonstrated that the war between law enforcement and organized crime was far from over, and that people like Alexandra Kane would continue to risk their lives operating in the shadows to protect national security. The Sarah Martinez identity was retired, but Viper 1 remained active, preparing for whatever dangerous assignment would require her unique skills next. In a world where criminal organizations operated across international boundaries with sophisticated technology and unlimited resources, elite undercover operatives remained one of the most effective tools for gathering the intelligence needed to protect innocent people from those who would exploit and harm them. The mission was complete, but the work continued. Alexandra Kane disappeared back into the classified world of covert operations, ready to become whoever she needed to be to serve her country and protect the people who would never know her real name or the sacrifices she made on their behalf.